Hey everyone. So, when you hear the word resilience, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably someone who's tough, right? An individual who can just bounce back from anything life throws at them. But what if that whole picture is missing the most important parts? Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful new way of looking at human strength that goes way, way beyond just one person. See, for the longest time, we've kind of treated resilience like this personal superpower. You've either got it or you don't. But what if it's not a solo act at all? A new perspective says, hold on. It argues that resilience is actually this dynamic thing we build together. It's a capacity that grows out of our connections, to our culture, to our community, and to the world around us.
And the framework behind this big shift? It's called the Holistic Resilience Theory, or HRT for short. And honestly, it's a groundbreaking model that completely flips the script on how we understand, and more importantly, how we support human strength when things get tough. So here's the game plan. We're going to walk through the 5 core ideas that make HRT so revolutionary. We'll start with seeing the whole picture, then we'll look at the potential we all have inside us, why context is absolutely key, the importance of finding harmony, and we'll wrap up with the crucial role of dignity and empowerment. Let's get into it. Okay, our first principle is a big one: holism. This is really the foundational shift here. It's all about moving away from zeroing in on one isolated problem and instead stepping back to look at the entire interconnected system of a person's life. And just look at how this redefines what well-being even is. It's not just, not being sick. It's a state of balance, of harmony, where our physical health, our emotional state, our social lives, our environment, and our culture are all woven together. They're not separate boxes to check. They're one single interconnected system. And that interconnectedness is exactly why this matters so much. Because these parts of our lives are inseparable. A problem in one area never just stays put. Nope, it creates a ripple effect. Let me show you what I mean, with a real-world example involving a pastoralist. So check this out. It all starts with one stressor, an environmental one. Their land is degrading. But that's not just an economic problem, right? It immediately triggers deep emotional grief over losing their ancestral lands, which is a huge cultural blow. Then, that stress spills over into their home life, creating social friction. And finally, all of that pressure starts to show up physically as things like chronic fatigue and headaches. See how that one problem just spread and infected everything? All right, so building right on that, we get to our second principle: inherent resilience. And I love this one because it's such an optimistic shift in how we see people. It's about moving from focusing on what's wrong with someone to focusing on what's already strong. HRT says that every single person and every community has something called an inherent resilience potential. You can think of it like a hidden well of skills, strengths, and ways of coping that are just sitting there, waiting to be tapped into. Resilience isn't something you have to install in someone. It's something you help them uncover and grow. Let's make this super clear with the example of a refugee. The old deficit-based way of looking at things would see only the trauma, only the loss, only what's missing. But the HRT asset-based view asks a totally different question. It asks, what incredible strengths did you bring with you on this journey? And the answers you find are just powerful. Maybe they have this incredible adaptability. You see it in how fast they're picking up a new language. Or maybe they have deep cultural strengths, like a super tight-knit family that's their rock. Or psychological assets, like a powerful spiritual faith that keeps them going. Now, HRT doesn't ignore the trauma, not at all, but it builds the solution on this amazing foundation of strengths that are already there. This leads us perfectly to a crucial third principle: contextual understanding. The big idea here is simple, but so important. One-size-fits-all solutions? They don't just not work. They can actually do more harm than good. So the bottom line is that any kind of help or intervention has to be tailored to the local reality. You absolutely have to understand the specific cultural norms, the environment, and the community you're working in. If you don't, you're just dropping in a solution that's never gonna stick. I mean, just imagine this. You take a standard Western mental health program for young people, one that's all about individual choices and uses clinical language, and you just plop it down in a rural community where the collective, the family, is everything. It's probably gonna fall flat, and it might even make things worse by making kids feel isolated from their families. Now, an effective HRT approach looks completely different because it adapts. Instead of one-on-one therapy, maybe you use group storytelling circles. Instead of a clinical term like depression, you'd use a local phrase they actually use, like a heavy heart. And you make the examples relevant to their lives, talking about farming or fishing. See? It's the same goal, but it's a completely different path, one that actually works. Our fourth principle, integration and harmony, builds right on that idea. Think about it. If stress makes life feel fragmented, like it's been shattered into a million pieces, then healing is all about putting those pieces back together into a whole that makes sense. This means we have to actively blend all the different parts of a person's world, their culture, their environment, their community, and what's going on inside their own head. The end goal is to help restore that feeling of wholeness, of psychological coherence. And what's really critical here is that HRT doesn't force this false choice between modern methods and traditional ones. No, it integrates them. So for instance, someone might work with a clinical psychologist to process their trauma on a cognitive level, while also participating in traditional healing rituals that restore their spiritual and community connections. It's about using everything we have to create a more complete path to healing. And that brings us to our final and, maybe the most important principle of them all, dignity and empowerment. This is all about recognizing that people have to be the authors of their own recovery. They have to be in the driver's seat. At its heart, this is all about respect. Respecting a person's ability to make their own choices, honoring their cultural identity, and focusing our efforts on building their confidence, their own belief that they can handle whatever comes next. This quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? Resilience is built from within, not imposed from without. True, lasting resilience can't be handed to someone like a package. It has to be built and owned by the person themselves. So in the real world, this looks totally different from just handing out aid. Instead of just giving out identical shelters, you provide housing that actually respects cultural traditions. Instead of an outsider deciding who gets what, you put community leaders in charge of that. And instead of creating dependency, you help restore livelihoods with tools and training, building real, lasting self-efficacy. So, if we pull this all together, here's the crucial takeaway. The holistic resilience theory is a massive shift. It moves us away from trying to fix what we think is broken in individuals and toward a much bigger, much more powerful goal, creating the supportive, culturally aware conditions where people and their entire communities can genuinely thrive. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. What if we all just stopped asking people, how resilient are you, as if it's some kind of test they have to pass? What if instead, the real question we should be asking ourselves and asking each other is this: how can we, together, create the conditions for everyone's resilience to emerge?